Hello again, fellow Earthlings. My name is Rogan, and you are watching The Mysterious Stoner in a Bowler. Right before we get into today's video, I need to let you guys know, previously, during quarantine, I wasn't working, and now I am again. I am in full swing work mode now. And so these videos are being done after I'm getting off of work, so I'm usually tired and I don't have a lot of time to mess around. So I am probably going to be making these videos significantly shorter if I can, which, well, after the last one, I'm sure that's going to be a relief for you to hear. And as much as I really, really enjoy my job and would enjoy doing it for the rest of my working years, I am far more interested in what I am about here on YouTube. Not necessarily YouTube specifically, but this is where it's all going to start. And I know I haven't told you everything that I'm going to be doing and attempting, but this is where it starts, and you will find out more as time goes on. But for now, let's get back to today's video. In the last episode, I shared with you my deconversion out of Christianity and a little bit of what I was able to piece together from the fragments of my mental house cleaning, I guess you could say. But what did I do after that? Well, my first order of business was to go back to Salem and apologize for the way I had acted towards it. I've been a bit self-righteous in my attitude, and it's really what separated us. It was way more so my fault than his. I don't really think he was to blame at all. And he accepted my apology, and he wasn't too thrilled when I told him that I had left Christianity, because he was a Christian too. He didn't take his family was more relaxed spiritually, so I don't want to say that he was less spiritual than me or he didn't take Christianity as seriously, because he is still a Christian even to this day. And he still takes his faith personally. We don't talk about our differences in spiritual opinions because it's one of those subjects, and we value our friendship more than that. But back to the time in the story. He accepted me back regardless, and I moved back into the apartment. We were roommates and best friends again, and life carried on. But it was so different for me now because I was looking at the world through a completely different set of eyes. Everything meant so much more to me because now I didn't know if there was an afterlife of any kind or if there was even one at all. It made me appreciate everything so much more in a completely different way. It made me value things so much more. And I started to finally start thinking for myself a bit more. Salem had helped me do that already, right before I had actually deconverted. He was a bad influence on me. My parents didn't like him very much because his parents had raised him to be so differently. And he himself had turned out, the more conservative Christians would say, he's a bit loose. Like, he likes to drink. He drinks beer on occasion. And he introduced me to drinking beer. He got me into it. And back when we stayed together, we made it, for a while, we made it a tradition to go to Hooters every weekend. And we'd have a pitcher or two of beer, and I'm not going to tell you how we got home. And in addition to that, I had started growing my hair out around that time. It was maybe around here, I would say. And the reason why that is significant, aside from, well, you can see how long it is now. It the reason why it's significant to me, and I never want to go back to having short hair again, is because growing up, my father, partially because he had been in the military for 9.5 years, he was very much into looking sharp and having a sharp haircut. And he would often do the haircutting himself, which wasn't terrible. He never gave me a bowl cut, but he always cut it the exact same way, and he always made me have to comb it. And so about maybe a year or a half a year before I deconverted from Christianity, I realized, hey, you know what? I'm living on my own now. I can make my own decisions about whether I want to have longer hair. And so I started growing it out. And yeah, it's a bit of a pain to deal with sometimes, but I love it. But it was one of these times at Hooters, after I had grown my hair out a bit. I didn't think it was that long at the time. Maybe it was shoulder length, possibly. And I wasn't going for the hippie look, okay? I just wanted the long hair because it was my choice. And we're hanging out there, and one of the waitresses, I don't think she was even our waitress. She may have been. But she came over and asked if we smoked weed. I had never smoked weed before in my life. I had never done any kind of drugs. Beer was the only thing I had ever put into my system that, well, according to my parents, I shouldn't. They were against drinking alcohol of any kind. They were against any kind of smoking, period. And we decided to buy some. So we took the weed home, and I YouTubed how to make a bong. And now the bong is still by far my favorite way of smoking. But I made a bong out of a Gatorade bottle, a pen, and some aluminum that I cut out of a Dr. Pepper can. But we both smoked the bit of weed that we got, and it was... I didn't know what it meant at the time, but I never forgot afterwards. That weed was level loud. And once I got that first hit of weed in me, I probably laughed for about 10 minutes straight over absolutely nothing. It was great. And like I mentioned in the previous video, my mind was free to explore things, to look at other options for beliefs and things of that nature. And I was curious. I wanted to, because my mind was unshackled from Christianity, I felt free to explore things. I felt free to embrace porn more and to actually learn about it, because I had always been scared of porn as a Christian because I wasn't supposed to look at it according to the Bible. But now that I was free, I could embrace that. I could embrace strip clubs a lot more freely. Yes, I went to a strip club before I deconverted. And that's a story for another time. But I also wanted to explore other things like Buddhism, Satanism, witchcraft, aliens. I wanted to hear the other perspectives that were out there on reality, because I didn't know if they were true or not. And of course, I still wanted to know the scientific reasoning behind everything, just absorb as much as I could. But unfortunately, I couldn't, to a certain degree, because I was having a lot of fun. Well, I was trying to have a lot of fun. That would be the more accurate statement, because a lot of my work at the time was through temp agencies. Now, I don't. That's what they're called here in the U.S. where I live. I don't know what they might be called in other countries, but a temp agency is a company that collects people that are looking for jobs and then goes to companies that are looking for employees, and then the temp agency lends temps, the people that work for the temp agency, to the company that needs employees. And the companies get a discount. They don't have to pay as much for the work. They don't have to pay benefits or anything like that. And a lot of times the temps don't have benefits and they get paid at a lower rate. And usually if they work about 3 months, they get hired in. Although there's a lot of companies that are dicks that don't hire and just bring in new temps. But that's the reason why I said all that is because I was a temp for a lot of this time. And I bounced around between a lot of different jobs and multiple temp agencies because I was just trying to pay the bills and get by, and also enjoy my life because I was a young guy. I was trying to have fun, responsible fun, but fun nonetheless. And so I was living from paycheck to paycheck, week to week, and it was rough. It was rough trying to grow myself because I was busy exploring all the aspects that, the more fun aspects that I hadn't been allowed to before as a Christian. But I was trying to get out of the whole temp agency shit cycle, especially that was occurring around where I lived at the time. And Salem managed to get a job through a temp agency, and I even tried to get a job at the same place through the same temp agency. And I made it to the job as a temp, but then some things happened. The first thing was that I had made a bucket list. It wasn't very long, but I had never made one before, and now I tried to figure out things that I wanted to do before I die. And the one at the top of the list was to get rid of wearing glasses for good. Mostly for good anyways. And I couldn't stand the thought of having contact lenses in my eyes, so when LASIK surgery came out, I happened to have a cousin that had it before I did, and it went well for him, and so I thought, that's what I want to do. And so I didn't save up for it. I went through it was supposed to be a pay plan, and the operation cost me about $5,000. So yeah, I went into $5K worth of debt over my eyes, and I was working hard to pay it off. I went through some drama with some jobs before I ended up where Salem was working at, and I was having a really tough time paying off those bills, and they were stacking up. Now, by the time I was at Salem's workplace, he had gotten hired in there already because he has one hell of a work ethic, which I learned from him, and it has helped me a good bit. But I hadn't been able to get myself hired in yet. By that time, Salem was no longer dating the best friend of my ex. In fact, they broke up, and my ex and her best friend got back together. It took them longer than it did for Salem and I, but it's kind of weird how that worked out. But point being, he was single by this point, and he'd always been determined to find the love of his life, to have a family of his own, and all that. And he did. At the very place we were working at, he met his soulmate. Of course, I was happy for him. But this meant that he would be moving out. She actually owned a house already. That's how well she was doing. But he would be moving out in with her, and there was no way that I would be able to keep up with the payments on the apartment. So this kind of put me between a rock and a hard place. I wasn't entirely sure what to do. I still had most of $5,000 worth of debt, and I could not make a living off of just being a temp, and I didn't know if I would actually even get hired into the workplace that Salem was working at, because they were one of those companies that tended to dick around their temps. So it wasn't a miracle, but it was. I mean, that's how much Salem impressed them. They were dicks, and he still impressed them, and they hired him. But I could not bet on getting hired myself because my work ethic wasn't quite the same as Salem's. I was working on it, and it wasn't a hard job, but you had to do pretty well to impress in order to get hired. And yeah, there was no guarantee that I would get in. So I started looking for alternative options. I don't recall the source of the inspiration, but I was inspired by someone or something I saw to take on a job that would guarantee my debt taken care of, as well as giving me a place to stay and taking care of all my bills. And it would let me travel for free. And the job was trucking. And so I signed up for trucking school. But you'll have to come back next week to hear all about that. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll leave a like, consider subscribing if you haven't, and turn that notification bell on, because apparently that's a thing now. But I hope you'll come back for next week's video. And now, I think I will go smoke some more weed and jack off. Sounds like an excellent plan to me. Until next time, my friends, farewell.